I think sometimes we devalue what we do as an industry. I know we always say, oh, we're not saving lives, we're just putting on a party. No. What you're not seeing is I'm saving lives by not adhering to shitty standards.
I don't think anyone takes us seriously outside of us. That's the industry that we're in.
Is the association the voice of the people, the voice of the industry? Yes or no? If not the associations, then who?
Saying you're an event professional is meaningless. It has no value. It is nothing. Prove to me that your definitions are from somewhere that has enough teeth for me to listen to you.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Production Value Matters, the business events podcast, and we're back with our monthly industry panel. Joining me, as usual, is Nick Borelli from Zenith. Hey, Nick. And Evan Babins from Scotiabank. Candace, again, is away. I think we're recording this on a holiday, so I think she's spending some time with her family. We're all terrible people. What can I say? So if you really like the podcast, please don't forget to leave a comment, share this with somebody in your network, or head over to productionvaluematters.com where you can sign up for more updates about the podcast and more deep dive content. Okay, so promo out of the way, let's get into this month's discussion. So, pardon me, like terrible segues, right? I'm not a writer. This is what I have to say. Just before we started recording, I was talking to both Nick and Evan about a session that I participated in at the Canadian Special Event Expo, which happened about 2 or 3 weeks ago as of this recording. And it was an amazing initiative called the Event Revolution that was led by the CSE team. And I was really honored to participate with, some heavy hitters in the Canadian industry, along with Stacey Wyatt, who runs editorial and is the CEO of that organization. And what it really was a call to action from the industry. We didn't want to sit there in a panel and say, this is what we think, and you should think this too. It was more like a workshop session with people in the room giving us direction. So the format of it was, hey, we're going to talk about we had 5 big subjects, everything from pricing and ethical standards to business practices to catering supply, all this kind of stuff. And we gave it to the audience and they voted for their top 3. And then we spoke about each of the topics to sort of set the stage of the state of the industry, what our experiences were hey, I've been in the business 20 years and this is how it's been. And this is where I think we can improve. And then we threw it to the tables for 45 minutes to discuss amongst themselves and as sort of delegate tables to then come to the panel and relay their thoughts, their hopes and wishes and calls to action and all that. So CSE is currently in the middle of compiling that. And then as an industry together, we're going to come out with a big joint statement, sort of like a conference of the parties kind of thing to try and stir some action in the industry. I think there's a lot of things in this industry that we kind of we all sort of sit at a bar at a conference and go oh God, I wish this would improve. These guys are taking some concrete action and I'm really, really happy to be part of that. I'm trying not to over dominate the conversation, but one of the things, and we were really talking about industry standards of practice, and that includes things like pricing, ethical standards, barrier to entry, just standards of practice, right? And one of the things that came up was the role of industry associations to maintain those things, to communicate those values, to have members of this industry adhere to that. And one of the comments that I made was, I realized that everybody was starting to talk about as a business owner and as a practitioner, I got to do a lot of client education to tell them what's good, what's bad, what's worthy, what's not worthy, all of those kind of things. And I reflected that, wow, somehow the associations have gotten away with making it my job and not their job. And it has been on the shoulders of individuals for several years. And I think that is a thing that should change. So I'm going to throw that grenade into this conversation and then get everybody's opinion on it. Evan, tell me, what are your thoughts?
So I think there's a couple of things to unpack here. I think the first thing that I actually don't think the three of us agree on this panel is, do associations speak for the industry or not? I'm of the opinion that they shouldn't speak for the industry, for the reason being that not everyone in the industry is a member of said, associations. Like, I'm not a member of any associations right now. And so do I want someone who I'm not a member of or I'm not aligned with or whatever to speak on my behalf of the industry? Personally, there's different feelings and people have different thoughts. I know Nick is very strong. Nick's gonna have a lot of right. That's, I think me and Nick are like very opposite actually in this sort of capacity in this topic. So I think that's a kind of number one, is like, is the association the voice of the people, the voice of the industry? Yes or no? Once that answer is kind of determined and kind of like assumed and aligned, then it's like, well, who gives them the right to speak for the industry? If the industry all buys into that and if everyone's agreed to that, that's a different story. But then I think the second piece is, if it's not the association, then who? And I don't know the answer to that question, which I think is why we come back to this topic, is if not the associations, then who? Because like you said earlier, if I'm an individual business owner, or if I'm just a practitioner in the industry, or if I'm, a lighting tech, or if I'm a photographer, or if I'm a DJ, like do I represent the industry? Can I speak on behalf of the industry? Like, you can definitely try, but then it's like, where does that lead up to and where does that level up to? And how do we sort of come to an industry-wide decision? And who can then, if not the associations, who is it? Is it global, industry-wide conferences and events that are taking the lead on thought leadership, like an IMAX or like a Cvent Connect, like one of those kinds of big shows? Are they the people who would speak for the industry if everyone aligns to that? So I think there's a couple of things here that we need to unpack, sort of as a precursor to, does the association speak for the industry? Yes or no?
So my big question on your comments, and I knew you would not agree with this, is like, what, like the question comes down to, why are you not a member of the industry associations? And if I can speculate, it's because they offer no value and no reason, right?
And cost.
And then
and
cost.
Yeah.
Sure, but like, cost is relative to the value that it extracts.
Yeah.
And so, when I think of other similar or connected industries or markets, and the example I gave on the panel was the Associated Designers of Canada, which is like the interior designers, right? Like they have standards of practice. Like you can't be a member if you don't carry insurance, if you don't have certain certifications, you can't do, like, you don't get this thing. And members flock to that. They every single practitioner, every single little independent business, every single sort of big firm is a member of that, because they go, yeah, I mean, like, this is, and in Canada we have like the colleges of physicians, right? Like, you can't practice being a doctor of a certain, either as a doctor generally, or as a specialist, if you aren't a member of the college, because the college goes out to the members and holds them accountable to ethical business practice, financial risk management, all of that kind of stuff, and then goes out to the public and says, hey, there's a difference between a guy who walks into an office and says, I'm a doctor, or I am a member of this college, and all of that kind of stuff. And so, look, those are extreme examples, and certainly not what we have right now. But then it pushes it onto you as an individual, doesn't it, Evan, to denote what a professional is.
Subjective.
Right? Subjective.
Which is also subjective, right? Yeah. And I think even just taking a step further on that, and then like I'll let Nick jump in as well too, but I think it's then, and we talked about this like last time a little bit, was like, as the doctor example, you have to be part of the college to practice medicine in Canada, and I'm sure other countries around the world have the same thing. But if different parts of the industry, and because the industry is so far spread, like, how do you measure that? How do you police that, quote unquote? How do you monitor every single person who's in the industry and if they're part of the club or not, or part of the association or not? Like, if I'm a single one-off florist, let's say, I do 5 events a year, weddings, let's say, I'm just as much of an event professional as a tech working for.
No, you're not.
You're
Sorry,
not.
and that's
Yeah.
the thing that I
Yeah.
think that
So
is
now,
the thing that
we
I
need
think.
definitions of like what
Yeah.
is who is described as an
So
event professional.
I'll give you.
What do you?
I
Yeah,
want to jump
yeah,
on that example because
yeah,
you're
yeah,
talking about a florist. It's the same way that like I call AV companies as an example, right? I don't know
yeah,
why they're members of like they can be a supporting member, but they
Sales.
do, like
yeah,
that
Leads.
is a market they sell to. So they are like I'm a member of the Canadian Audiovisual Providers Association because a lot of what I do is sell audiovisual products and services to various markets, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so in your florist example, there's like maybe there needs to be an international alliance of professional
Florals.
florists,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But
yeah,
like a florist is not like a doctor is not a marketing professional just because they every once in a while go and work for a marketing company to check everybody's health. I'm making an obtuse
yeah.
example
Of
here,
course, of
but
course.
that doesn't mean that they should be part of a professional association of event professionals, right? Or marketing professionals. And so this is where I think it like the idea that the associations went out and said everybody who ever touches an event is now an event professional. It was a money grab. It was a
Yeah,
money grab to get fees. And it's like that's not your job. Your job isn't to make money off of anybody who's ever worked on an event. Your job is supposed to be maintaining a greater standard for the specific practice that we govern, right? And so it's like I'm a member of MPI right now. And so I am not a meeting planner. I use my membership as a way to get to my customer base and try to communicate with them. I would if they came out tomorrow with like we're not giving you a membership, you're going to be a supporting something or a
supplier or whatever. Yeah,
sponsor or
yeah,
whatever it is. I would buy into that tomorrow because I hate walking into a room and saying, "Oh, you're a member of MPI? We're the same." No, we're not. And I'm trying to differentiate that as much as possible. Sorry, that was my rant. Nick, off you go.
I mean, it's a lot to unpack. I mean, I don't know how we're eventually not going to get back to the conversation: are we an industry or not? Uh, because a collection of markets ends up being how it's being, I think, done today. The associations, like if I want to be a pilot, I can't do what Evan is doing and not being a member of the Federal Aviation Administration. I can't not get licensed by them because they're a serious thing, and we've made ourselves not serious. There's no teeth, and because there's no teeth in saying you have to be a member, and because they don't have the teeth because they probably don't offer enough value, it's just like this big cycle, right? Like they've really mostly settled into a very comfortable position of facilitating networking and business opportunities as their primary function, as opposed to what you're saying, Matthew, which is to say raising the bar, standing up for us, the barriers, the education that is not nice to have but need to have. It's all nice to have, like if I'm a member, it's nice to be a member. Don't need to. Evan is an awesome company doing great work. They don't need to do it. It's not irresponsible at the current stage of what is being offered at associations for him not to be a member. Like it's all self-regulated and self-guided because the associations have been relegated to a position of facilitation of business between suppliers and organizers. If they were more aligned with cosmetologists, barbers who have to go to a cosmetology board like that, it's not all just like life and death stuff. Like it's associations that create these standards and say and worked with their governments to say it's pretty irresponsible for people who have scissors next to hair not to get a license. I mean, and then the stakes, I think, maybe in this group, not as high, but uh, the stakes are not that high, period. Versus if you think about an event organizer, I don't think anyone would regulate a florist from the events industry. I don't think anyone would even regulate event professionals. Event professionals are borderline a term. If event industry is borderline a term, work in the event market, maybe. But event organizers, the people who assemble the teams, who are ultimately responsible, who have a discipline that can make decisions that could impact people's lives detrimentally or positively, that steer economic business one way or the other, those are the people who would be regulated in this world where the associations had the teeth, had the focus, and did all that. And then it would be kind of, you wouldn't have the option to do that. But the problem is that it's a series of markets, and the only thing that is out there in a position to be the place to look at and say you haven't done your job at the level that you're trying to hold people accountable to would be the EIC, because there is a fairs industry, there's a festivals industry, there is a conference industry, there is a trade show industry, there is a special events industry, there is a wedding industry. Every one of those things thinks it's a thing. It doesn't think the other one next to it is the same as them. Meanwhile, who's regulating any of it? And the suppliers move between all of those things without a care in the world because they're just various markets. So this collection of markets, it would have to fall under the EIC, and it would have to be principled, I think, around the things that are the most important, which is safety, probably primarily safety, and the goals of aspirationally building this to be more and more and more, to be the point where you're like, wow, you can't put on an event without a license, in the same way that you can't cut someone's hair without a license.
Can I just jump on the one thing that like, because you said this before on a previous panel about like the responsibility ultimately going up to the EIC, right?
I guess. Otherwise, you just pick one corner of the industry and you hold them accountable. Meetings people, what's going on? And they would say, what about conference people? What about trade show people? What about the fairs people? The fairs people touch more people than the conference people do.
100%. And so there's 2 points I want to jump on. One being, as you said, like, if you need a license to cut hair, why don't you need a license to put it, like, have 40,000 people in a conference center, and be accountable and responsible for their health and safety, and the risk management, the financial risk management, and all of those kind of things. The second thing is, why do we keep on trying to find one organization to rule them all?
That's a great point too.
Vacuum. What is wrong with hyper specialization? So look, there is like, I think that there are similarities between meetings, conferences, and trade shows, that we could find all sorts of common ground, which is completely different from the methodology and the practice of, say, wedding and social event planning. Look, I say this all the time. I run into wedding planners, and I think that they are highly skilled in like a very particular set of skills that I have no idea how to do. And I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. I should not be part of any organization that governs wedding professionals, because I'm just not that person. But neither should they be part of an organization that does, large scale events. That's just not, like, we don't speak the same language. And so what's wrong with having, I'm not trying to say, like, let's have one association to rule them all. I just want somebody to be the voice and the level of standards for, like, my little silo, maybe. Is that not that could be a solution?
I mean, standards and practices on specifically safety and those kinds of concerns, which is a lot of what licenses are associated with, could potentially bridge all of the gaps. If you bring people together, you have to have a minimum set of skills in order to bring 150 people together for a wedding and not get them sick, or 150 people together for a meeting and not have a stage collapse on them. Like, there is overlaying principles on gatherings and the people who are, but that's about it. It would be like a pass-fail license type thing. That could be like some level of like maybe what that could be that would bridge all the gaps. As far as elevating, I don't think anybody in the wedding industry could help elevate the conference industry. I don't think anyone in the trade show industry could help elevate weddings. Like, I think that you're absolutely right. They don't have enough thumb on the pulse of that to understand that. So the associations of the specific elements of the events world would be the ones in charge of that. All of it would require everyone to come together and say, you have to be a member. It has to have teeth. They can expunge you. You could be removed from the bar association if you violate an ethical line. You would have to be able to have enough muscle behind that to have value. If you did that, then it's strong enough of a group. The problem is that would people respect it? Because the levels these things would have to climb in order for you to be like, I don't need you then. I'll create my own group. We'll do our own thing and we'll regulate that. Like, that's how every event association thus far has gone. And they've all eventually, think the ones that survived got to a point where they're just facilitating business. Like, they get enough strength, enough power, which means they're getting enough funds to do things. When they get enough funds to do things, they have business masters. The business masters say, what you're doing is you're putting this person in front of me so I can sell my city to them. And that's what they do. They facilitate business meetings, and the rest of it, they wouldn't want to expunge people because that's dollars. They wouldn't want to hold people accountable because the people they're holding accountable might be a specific sponsor level next year. Like, it's all just, maybe it'd be nice if like, the environment's kind of not great, so maybe if we didn't, it would be cool. Like, it's so soft that it's basically background noise. So, like, I think that's where people's disillusion comes at different levels with the associations. Is they start off saying, we're going to be this, we're going to hold people accountable, whatever, but boy, that takes a lot of muscle and strength and power. We need to get some money in order to do that. Once you take money, you take masters. Once you take masters, you dilute what you're doing. And that's, I think, the story of every association that isn't regulated.
So why isn't that not worked with, like I see that pattern that you're laying down, right? Of the, once you take money, like, you are then responsible or responsive to those masters. But why isn't that worked for other industry associations, right? Like, and I think that comes from delineating, like, yeah, look, we're going to be transparent about this. Like, we're going to create the Association of Professional Event Producers, right? Which is a very specific subset. And yeah, hotel brand, you can be a sponsoring or supporting member, and we understand that that's like, and there will be a fair exchange of value for the money that you're doing to help fund this. But you're not going to be a member. You're never going to sit on the board. You're never going to sit in leadership.
That's another thing. Good point.
And because I think, like, what happens in that model that you're talking about, Nick, is that, well, eventually, like, because, the person who runs destination promotional organization, who wants to get in touch with meeting planners and stuff like that, is a full and recognized member. So constitutionally, when they run to be the president of the organization, all of a sudden, like, your leadership isn't a bunch of meeting planners. Your leadership is a bunch of hotels. And you go,
almost always,
now we're the Association of Hotel Selling Professionals, right? So that's where I think, like, tweaks of bylaws could fix that problem pretty quickly. Evan, sorry, we've been jumping back and forth.
No worries. No. I have, like, there's a couple of, like, big pieces here that I just want to bring up quickly. So, going back to the example that Nick gave of, like, that 40,000 person conference, and it's like, we're managing from a predominantly safety perspective, making sure, like, nothing happens and whatever. I think the big question we have to ask ourselves is, if I need a license to host a 40,000 person in a conference center, who is actually responsible for that license? Is it the venue? Is it the organization who's hosting the event? Is it the AV company, who presumably is really the only vendor or company or group of people in that environment who have a risk of safety involved? Like, a photographer there's nothing a photographer is doing that's going to put a human life in risk. There's nothing that, and maybe you could argue that culinary side of things is also responsible for safety from a food and safety.
They are
and
regulated.
The bar, and they're regulated, whatever. But like outside of AV production and physical production, so like if I'm the company who's actually rigging the truss and flying projectors and flying speakers, outside of that company, there's not really many other people who are putting the lives of 40,000 people at risk, again, outside of the kitchen. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, like I was going to say, well, look, to Nick's point, all of the food service providers are regulated and
100%.
licensed.
100%.
All of the technical
they
people
not be
should
regulated.
be certified in ETCP standards of practice, which is I can't remember what ETCP stands for. It's like the event technology. Anyway, it's like the like when you mention rigging, like you cannot rig in a building in North America and globally, I think, without an ETCP certification. And so, look, I don't think that the standard that you have to do to let's just like pick on producers or people who call themselves producers for now, right? And whether or not that's a company or an individual, right? That anybody can walk around saying I'm a producer, right? Because there are no sort of standards that say like just basic reciprocal standards that says if I'm a producer, I am certified that I will always adhere to ETCP protocols and food safety and smart serve and all of these kind of things, right? And the difference being that there is no standard of that. So they can go in without liability to go like, well, I didn't know they weren't ETCP certified. I had no idea. And like, I don't have any liability there. And so it makes insurance more expensive. It makes risk management more risky, all of those things. So if we had an organization whose whole thing was not to keep the rigging people accountable because they have that, like we have those standards. We have the Event Safety Alliance, which sets, admittedly, recommends setting safety standards across with consultation from outside organizations and from feedback from the industry and each individual market. They broker conversations and input from industry stakeholders who said, okay, well, you're a staging company, you've done X, Y, and Z. What are the safeties? Like, help inform these standards. But there's nothing for producers and nothing to hold them liable or accountable for going into a room and saying, I know that we're using an ETCP certified rigging company and or individual, which is why like you've got two producers, one who does adhere to that standard and one who does not because they are ignorant of it, because they never were trained or whatever. And they're seen as the same value in the market. And that's like what is devaluing it. Every time an event professional says to me, oh my God, I can't get my fees. It's like, well, because you're not charging the right fees and you don't know what to charge for. That's where I'm like, these things exist except for us. And I like, why is it except for us?
And I think there's a lot of ambiguity on like what does that mean? Like in my mind, as you were talking, everything you were kind of saying to me in my head was like the risk and the safety and the liability factors to me, and this may be true or not true across the board here, but I think that should come back to the venues themselves, because at the end of the day, everything happens inside of the four walls of the venue, whatever your venue is. If it's a conference center, if it's a ballroom, if it's a soccer field that you're having an event at, it's the venue that at the end of the day, like, should carry that liability of what happens inside of it. Because at the end of the day, people are inside that space. It's the physical space they're in. Now, that may not be true across the board, and there's exceptions and whatever else. But I think it's the ambiguity factor of like you said, Matt, like there's producer one who has the liability, who knows the liability, who knows the rules, who knows what to expect, who knows what's to demand of crews and kitchen staff and bartenders and whoever else is responsible to have those licenses and those certifications. And then you have producer B who doesn't care or doesn't know or has never been trained. They're both actively working in the industry, producing events that are seemingly going well and nothing happens at. And then you don't really think about it until something actually happens. And you're like, who has the responsibility to fix the problem that just happened? I.e., a speaker stack falls on a guest, or someone gets food poisoning, or somebody gets, too drunk at a bar and then, God forbid, gets in a car crash. Like, it's like nothing happens, no conversations generally happen until something forces a conversation to happen about that. So I think it's a lot of the ambiguity of like, where does that actually land on? Who is actually responsible and how can you limit it? Like if you have producer B who's doing events all the time, who doesn't care or know or do anything about it, they're still going to run events regardless if they have a license or not have a license or know what to ask for from their vendors and their partners. So without mandating every single person across the board joins the club, and even still, if you mandate them to join the club, you will still have people who are doing events that are not part of the club. I don't think will ever be. I mean, it's going to happen. Like I think it's going to happen. Like regardless,
do people do unlicensed?
You can't. Like I just don't think you will be able to find every single person across the entire world to be like, you have to join the club or you can't do events, regardless of who it is.
Planning a multi-day event or conference? Then you know how chaotic managing show content can get. Version issues, last-minute changes, and the post-show scramble to send out IMAG recordings. ShowSync is built to fix that. It's your central hub for managing presentations, media, and video recordings across your event, without the mess of cloud folders or lost file links. With ShowSync, your show content stays organized, your crew stays in sync, and your post-show video files are delivered faster and cheaper, so you can move on to the next big thing without chasing down drives. Learn more at showsync.ca, because your content should work as hard as you do.
Enjoying the show? Don't miss a single episode. Follow Production Value Matters wherever you get your podcasts. And for bonus content, tools, and event insights, head over to productionvaluematters.com and subscribe. Stay sharp, stay inspired. Production Value Matters.
Yeah, I don't think it's about forcing people to become members. I think it's by to be honest. Let's take your thing further, right? That producer A, producer B, producer A adheres to these standards, is a member of the standard association of blah 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 blah, and B doesn't. And you're right, both events go off without a hitch, and the market perceives that there's no real difference here until something goes wrong. And look, we've shared examples, and we all have horror stories of things that we've seen where something goes horribly wrong. And I think on a previous episode, we were talking about the Toronto Raptors victory parade and how it was just lucky that nobody died, right? And it's a little bit Wild West. And so, look, eventually, this is where I say, shouldn't it be the job of the associations to go, there is a difference between A and B? And furthermore to that, as that difference is communicated, I think that client X, right, who is using producer B, will eventually see their insurance costs start to skyrocket. Because if we can convince the insurance companies that hey, this is a huge, massive financial liability that could go wrong, and the insurance companies would then put pressure on brand X to hire a certified and licensed individual. That's really how those standards develop in the College of Physicians and all of those things. Like the College of Physicians, one of their biggest contributors and stakeholders are insurance companies, because they want to make sure that if they're giving insurance to doctors, that they are certified in something, because if something goes wrong in malpractice, ooh, is that expensive? And so that's what it inevitably drew at. There was legislation and there was liability. And to your point, back 150 years ago, like if like there was no college of physicians, and or it's longer than that, but there was a period where there was no college of physicians, and people died, and charlatans practiced, and all of these things, and legislation, risk management, financial risk management, and the public all put pressure on it to make it happen. And I think sometimes we devalue what we do as an industry. Like, I know we always say, "Oh, we're not saving lives; we're just putting on a party." No, no. I'm putting on a party for you, client, or whatever it is. But I'm also like, what you're not seeing is I'm saving lives by not adhering to shitty standards. I am actually adhering to professional standards of health and safety. I follow the ESA, the Event Safety Alliance, ETCP, all of those things I do, and I have insurance.
That's like marketing,
but
right now.
But that only applies to certain segments and certain vendors and companies within the industry. Like, again, to go back to the photographer example, the photographer isn't having that same conversation. They are not saving lives. They don't have any risk associated with it, unlike the AV side, the culinary side, the bartending side, and potentially a handful of things. Like if you have, an activation that is like, a VR activation that's you're taking people's, like you're putting things on people's heads, like there is risk involved with that too, right? But there are more companies and partners and parts of the industry that don't deal with that and are literally not having to worry about life and death and risk and anything else, that I just don't know how you would be able to say the same thing as you say to staging companies that you do to other areas of, like, for example, I'm a PowerPoint designer and I work on 1,000 events a year. That, to me, I would say that I am an event professional. I'm in the event industry. I'm part of the industry. But I don't have to worry about anything like that. So do I have to get a license or a certification, or do I have to be a member?
You don't have to
of a creative license or a creative association, like to be a member of the club. Like, that's what I'm struggling with those sides. I'm aligned. Like, I'm aligned to like the culinary, the AV, the staging, the rigging, like I'm like, those people all have licenses, they have certifications, they're monitored, they're covered. But really, outside of those pieces, where is the risk? Like, what is the risk that they have to worry about? And then furthermore, if there's no risk, if there's no safety, if there's nothing that physically makes them have to join a club or an association or a group or a collective, I just don't know how we find all those people across the world who are part of the events industry. If you do one event or if you do 1,000 events a year, I think it will be so incredibly difficult to physically find those people and even just speak to them to say, hey, we are thinking of doing this. Are you aligned? Will you sign up for it? Will you become a member of it? Will you adhere to the protocols and to the rules that we are now suggesting? I think you'll find, and you'll get all the big players and all the big companies and all the major players a lot easier than you will the small individual entrepreneur, solopreneur, small companies across the entire world. Or do we think about it not as a global thing, but as a regional or a national? So Canada has one, the US has one, France has whatever. And then do you have, like, leading up to that, do you have like a North American thing and a Europe and an Asia and a whatever? So like, that's where I think the big hole is in all of this, is like, yes, we need it. It's important. We should do it. But how do you physically find all the people that you need to find to get them aligned?
My question then becomes about, why is it about volume, right? So to use your example of the graphics operator and PowerPoint designer, Do I think that that person, just because they work primarily in meetings, events, conferences, all of that kind of stuff, do I think that they're an event professional? No. I think that they're a graphics designer. I think, whatever, like however you want
Someone
to do
does
it.
graphics for the dental industry exclusively, and they don't have to get licensed by the
Yeah, they're not a certified
but that person's welcome to
CD.
say that they're in the dental industry. Who cares? That's a
Yeah.
meaningless statement. Saying you're an event professional is meaningless. It has no value. It is nothing. If I put on, I produced an event a week and a half ago for my 7-year-old daughter's birthday party. I'm also, because of that, I'm in the events industry. I'm an event designer. I'm an event strategist. I'm an event producer. All of those words, meaningless. Anyone can use them in any combination. Who cares? And if you think otherwise, prove to me that your definitions are from somewhere that has enough teeth for me to listen to you. Because it's just my words versus your words versus whatever. That's the industry that we're in. We're in whatever you want. Everything is anything. Who cares? Because I don't think, and this is the part that I think is probably we haven't talked about yet, I don't think anyone takes us seriously outside of us. So, okay, physician, do you know what association makes sure that they get their information, or like they're regulated? It's not an association. It's the state medical board, at least in the U.S. Nursing, state board of nursing, state board of pharmacy, state dental board, state psychology board, accounting. That is an association. State board of accountancy, state real estate. These are federal. Do you think the federal government cares about party planning, be it a conference for 100,000 people or not? I'm going to tell you, it doesn't. And that's our problem. We would have to get them to pay attention. We would have to get them to create a government body. Like, how could you make it so somebody couldn't be a member of the club? You make it illegal for them not to be. Now, who do you have to prove to do that? You have to prove to the government and the constituents that this is something that you would spend tax dollars regulating. And I think that's an absolute uphill battle. I think it's possible. I think you'd have to make a very big case, and you'd have to really figure out what these things are regulating. And so I was messing around with ChatGPT, and it's like, what is the essence of why these associations and why these groups are dedicated state funding and state officials who guide those things? And it's because they have to protect public safety, maintain ethical standards, and ensure professional competence. Nothing about like try to make it bigger or better or cooler or whatever. Those three things. So if you aren't doing anything that impacts public safety at that level has huge ethical ramifications that would have to be legally arbitered by a legal body that would have to be created. Otherwise, the associations with these, like an example is the American Dental Association. The state dental board is the one with the teeth. The state dental board says, you're a dentist, you're not a dentist, you are, you're not. The American Dental Association exclusively has a voluntary position associated with that exclusively provides guidance only, because they're the insider people. The rest of them are government officials that are looking at black and white stuff. Are you competent? Are you this or that? They take guidance from the ADA and say, this is and they say, well, is this reasonable? Is this not? Because they're not protecting the industry. They're not growing the industry. They're protecting the public. That's why lawyers are that. They're protecting the public. So we would have to very radically think about what we do in a different way. And it would not impact production companies, I don't think, too much. It would on the second end, but it would only be talking to organizers. That's it. Everyone else is, again, if they want to say they're an event professional, that's a meaningless statement. Say it all you want. All they really care about is who is in the events world, who makes the decisions to bring people on, what is their process, and how are they making those decisions in a wise way. So it would have to be exclusively focused, not on the entire industry, but on, I believe, the organizer. And if it's not the organizer, then it becomes all these other little groups, and they would have to fight that same process as well. There would have to be a state production company board and a state. There already is one for food and beverage, a venue one, and have venue rules. That's possible as well. But like, if you're talking about the events industry, you're talking about event planners. And if you're talking about event planners, then yeah, it's the Wild West. You can say you're an event planner. You can do as many people at your event as you would like. There's no ramifications and there's no legalities associated with your standing in the ability to continue to do licensed event work. So like, it all comes down not necessarily on the associations. The associations would have to lobby for state, and then probably wouldn't get any further than that. Not international, not national, likely state or provincial boards to be able to license people or not. And I think that the only people who would make that case in order to lobby in front of governments would be the associations, because if not them, then who? And I think the reason that they have never done something like that, and they've chosen, the EIC is the best example I can think of, self-guidance, is that if the government comes in and says what you can and can't do, they might start saying people can't make money the way that they make, and that would be a problem. So now it's all in the hands of us to self-regulate and keep your heads just below the whatever. But like, we don't have lobbyists saying we want to have our people be licensed, and anyone who works on it has to meet specific as it changes between party control to other party control, your guidance on how we want to do business. So I guess the question is, do we want to have regulation? Do we want to be that? Because a different political body comes into power, and I'm very much in the midst of this, and they say, you can't do this anymore. You can't produce events for this group of people. Bathrooms legally need to be man or woman. I don't know. They could do that, because these are all done by guidance of governmental organizations with an association who provides soft guidance. But if you want teeth, which I say that none of the associations have whatsoever, the only teeth that exists for licensing is the government. And that it means you'd have to do a tremendous battle to get to that point. And once you did, then you would relinquish the power completely. So like, worse than Evan's like not interest in clubs, would you be even more excited if the government was telling you what you could plan?
No, absolutely not. But that being said, if you look at the work of LEC right now, right, and one of the reasons that in Canada we formed the Canadian Audiovisual Providers Association is to lobby policy in government and specifically in the case of the CAVPA, it was during COVID. They went to the government of Canada to say, hey, we need some relief. Like, we're going to lose all these jobs. We're going to lose all of this funding and all of this kind of stuff. And the first question they said is, well, what's your professional association? Because all governments respond to groups. They don't respond to individuals. And so, look, I don't think that it's about like step one, let's all set a standard, and then step two, make the government deal with it. There's a longer journey there.
There's a different journey, and that's self-regulation that is done better. That it's so, and like
all I'm trying to say is that it's like I don't think that that there needs to be an overarching standard of practice for every single person who ever touches an event or a meeting or something. I said this earlier, that I'm a member of MPI and I am desperate for a membership or a supporting role that doesn't say that I'm a meeting professional. I'm not a meeting professional. I'm a production specialist. I produce events. I'm a producer, all of those things. And so there's nothing out there that differentiates me from a meeting planner. There's nothing that differentiates me and my organization from a DJ who used to do bar mitzvahs and now all of a sudden thinks that they can do like gigantic global events.
I know so many.
That was a direct shot on me, I think.
No.
I don't appreciate that.
I've worked with some.
Look, but like
I was like, that's my entire career.
I know an association of just those people.
Look, my career started as a arts technician, right? As a stage manager, which dealing with artists and actors and 10 out of 12 rehearsal days, and I had to adhere to standards of practice based on the Professional Association of Canadian Theatres, which is one party on that, and the Canadian Actors Equity Association, which was a labor regulation, but also also a standard regulation of my standards of practice. Now, you and I, Evan, came to this world from different places. But I want to make a difference between you, Evan, who went through all of those hurdles and got to where you are. And there's a difference between you doing what you're doing right now, which is a certification and experience that you have earned, versus a company or an individual who currently has been a DJ for a year and is producing large scale events for corporations. And I go, there's a difference between those two. And
Is it a marketing difference?
No, there is an actual difference.
No,
there
I
is an
agree.
actual difference.
No, it's tangible. It's tangible. It's all it is marketing, but it is tangible too. There's both. It's both. It's a little bit of storytelling and it's a little bit of tangible as well.
You want to make the tangibles more tangible because right now it's marketing and you just want to make these things like, look, nobody in the right mind wouldn't hire somebody if they didn't have certification A, B, C. And right now people hire anyone like based on their market.
But I think that they hire anyone because there is nobody out there except for an individual who is saying there is a difference between, guy A and Evan, right?
Totally.
Evan has this experience and these, well, I don't know what certifications you hold, but I'm sure there's a couple out there. You've gotten this level of education, you've done this training, you've got this certificate, whatever it is. I don't care. Right? As long as there is somebody out there who isn't putting it on the shoulders of Evan to sit in front of a corporate buyer or the market itself and say, there is a difference, trust me. It makes Evan's job harder differentiating himself from DJ Jim, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what we need. Honestly, I think we need a couple, and I think there has to be marketing of these stringent guidelines that are created by organizations, and we could put a pin as to whom that would be. But like there would also have to be like the CMP exists. Like the argument from the establishment would be, we've got that. It's called the CMP. There is, lots of different industry people who look at this. I remember I looked and audited a couple different elements of it because it hadn't been done in 10 years. And I was like, oh, well, a lot's changed in 10 years. So like those things are real, but like I think that we would need to take and elevate the sort of, if you don't have these things, then you're at the lowest level. You're qualified to do birthday parties, but that's about it. And like that's fair, like you don't need that. But I think a couple different certifications or something is not the extreme of what the dystopian thing of the government tells who could plan events and who can't, in the same way that dentists work in that place. I think we need certifications that have a little bit more meat to them, and maybe there's a little bit more variety that everyone in the industry believes in, not just an association. Because the associations, I give out a certification from an association. Like I created a curriculum for that. What does that mean at the end of that? You took some, watched some videos. So it has to be something that is sort of pass fail, and then a hierarchy as far as what's important. Safety I think is probably paramount. And then after that, it becomes, decision-making, ethical, those kinds of things. But if we had that and people universally looked at that, every single person I know at the CMP says, I got it as a differentiator in the marketplace. So they got it to make themselves more marketable. But like, if it was something that it was, I got this because that's what, at this point in my career, if I don't do this, I'm not the next level. Like it's a rite of passage. That would be a big difference. And I think that would be interesting. Like if you're 10 years into a career and you haven't got this yet, then that's a problem.
So I had this interesting debate with somebody about the CSEP, which is the Certified Special Events Professional, which is which I have. I was debating that that's not actually like a bar to achieve. Like to me, those certifications are a base qualification, right? Like
Agree.
getting that base education and that knowledge base is pretty base. But I agree with you that we should diversify those a little bit. And Avixa does this quite well with the certified technology specialist.
Yeah.
Or CTS. They like the first level is you get a CTS. Like that means I know the difference between 120, 110 volts alternating current and 208. And I know how to, the difference between a BNC connector and an XLR connector. And those are completely unrelated. Anybody who has a technical mind just made fun of me when I said that. But whatever it might be, like you know what these acronyms mean. So that's a CTS. And then from the CTS, you can diversify and augment your certification and say, I'm a CTS-I, which stands for audiovisual integration, which is a highly specialized, highly regulated field because it goes into electrical standards association and all of those kind of things. Then you can do a CTS-D, which is a design. So I can design systems, and that's where my knowledge base is.
So it's a journeyman program. Like it has build to it. That's great. I mean,
but again,
excellent.
so what? Like if the three of us all had CSEPs, we do very different things. You work in tech, Nick. I work in production, and although Evan does as well, like he does planning and various other things that I have no idea to do. So it doesn't make sense for all three of us to have the exact same certification. We can say that we have a certification in common, the CSEP, but if mine was CSEP-P for production and yours was -T for technology, and Evan, yours was -I for integration or whatever it is, then that's a differentiator. And then you start to hierarchy and differentiate those things.
Towards
now, do I think that there should be a CSEP-F for florists? Not necessarily, because I don't think that's a highly specialized skill that is intrinsic only to this industry or this market. So that's my general opinion. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. Evan, do you have any last words?
I think this is a conversation that is not ending today. It won't end for a long time.
Years.
And I think we could be here for a long time talking about it. So I think the more conversations we have about this, the more, not just us, obviously, but the more the industry and the collective has about this, the more maybe we'll actually see something happen from it. And I think that's just what we need to keep doing, is just keep having these conversations and make them as widespread as we possibly can.
Nick, any last thoughts before we sign off?
I mean, I hopefully nobody listens to this and just feels like, dismayed or like, disenfranchised. Like that, you can, as an individual, we're talking about macro stuff here. As an individual, you can make huge strides towards all of these areas. And if you're in a position that you are hiring people and bringing people on, act as if you're one of those bodies that doesn't quite exist yet, and say, like, tell me about, your ethical guidelines, and tell me about your experience. I mean, these are absolutely important when it comes to being an event organizer that brings people together anyway. But consider looking less at the marketing and more about the concrete examples and the actual experience. Because and this is one of the things that I talk about a lot in my world, the marketing is going to get better and better. I mean, I'm looking at all these automated videos where I can make it look like I worked on this event, who knows? Like that stuff, the fakery involved in marketing is exponentially getting better. So ask people tough questions about the things that really matter, so you can, in the stand-in for us being able to regulate or have this higher level, be that in your community.
Absolutely. All right. So thank you again for joining us for another episode of Production Value Matters. Again, if you want to access more resources around the podcast, or you just want to be a fan, go to productionvaluematters.com and you can subscribe there. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, on the YouTube channel, or in Spotify, leave a comment, share. We would love to reach more people just like you who want to learn more about the event industry, the market, where it's going, and what we can do to fix it. All right, Nick and Evan, thank you so much for joining me again today.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Always.
Production Value Matters, the business events podcast, is brought to you by Byrne Production Services. To learn more about Byrne Production Services and how we can achieve your business goals, head over to byrneproductionservices.com. Thanks for listening.